Keith is the Director of Peer and Recovery Support Services of ACRP, which serves Cambria, Somerset, Bedford counties.
Correct.
What does your job entail, first off, and what led you to this job?
As the Director of Peer and Recovery Support Services, we work with, at the moment, adults, so that's 18 and older, on the peer support side that have a serious mental illness as defined by the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Those are bipolar, schizophrenia, major mood disorders, personality disorders, things like that are seeking recovery from that mental illness. And what we do in the program is, in order to be a certified peer specialist in the state of Pennsylvania, you yourself have to be a self-identified person in recovery from mental illness and be willing to disclose your past with those individuals to work with them on a peer-to-peer basis. And then on the recovery support side, it's the exact same thing, but strictly drug and alcohol. Now, in the world, both the mental health and drug and alcohol world, we very often get people that are dually diagnosed, that have mental health stuff and drug and alcohol. So depending on which route they're referred to is how we work with them. But the jobs are essentially the same. The CPSs or the CRSs go out, meet with the individuals, help them formulate a treatment plan or their goals. And through that main goal, we break that down into little steps and share our lived experience in the mental health and drug and alcohol struggles that we've had in our past to help them achieve those goals.
So the way that this links into the addiction and substance abuse is that these are underlying things that people need to address.
Yes, sir.
Is the whole thinking behind this. So we start addressing the actual problems, then you're not masking with drugs.
Correct.
Okay. How did you get involved to this position?
I grew up in the area. I grew up in Vinco, and after high school, went to college, moved away. I never wanted to live in the small town. I always wanted to get out of here, and I did for about 15 years. I lived in Pittsburgh, I lived in Orlando, DC, Philly, kind of all over the place, and my father passed away about 7 years ago now. After he had passed away, I moved back up to help my mom. I was working in the golf industry down south. That's what my first degree is in, professional golf management. Moved back up here, took the first job I could find. I think I was working in a call center, and then I delivered pizzas. And my sister, who is a BSc mobile therapist, or was for ACRP at that time, told me about the peer support program. She obviously knew my past because she was my sister. I took the interview, and I ended up taking the job. So 2 things I swore I would never do is work in social services like the rest of my family and live in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Today, I run a social service program, and I own a home and raising a family here.
When you talk about your past, the reason why you know a lot about this is because you also struggled.
Absolutely, yes. So a little bit about that. As a newborn, I was born with severely clubbed feet in both my left and right feet. Oh. So I actually endured 6 surgeries by the age of 5, and then 2 or 3 more by the time I was in middle school. So pretty much from day one, I was on large doses of opioid prescription medication as well as barbiturates. Pretty much all through elementary school, middle school, high school, and pretty much the doctors were just throwing that stuff at me. I don't know if I was ever informed of the dangers. I don't know if my mother was ever informed of the dangers. I know she carries a lot of guilt.
Well, who would know? I mean,
right.
You have a baby with an issue. And
Yeah, so that led to, getting into high school is when I realized, obviously building a tolerance for being on them for 15, 16 years. I realized if I took a couple extra ones, I would feel better. And I needed so much more by that point. By the time I got to college, that was right around 2000 when the Oxycontin was booming at that point. You could pretty much walk into many doctor's offices here in Johnstown and they would just throw them at you. So by the time I got into college, that's when I realized that you could party with them and use them not as they were intended. So
you went to heroin eventually? Or?
Eventually, yeah. And that's the natural progression of a lot of people that we see is 2002, 2003, the oxys became very expensive on the streets. The doctors started cracking down a little more then. They were harder to get. And that left a huge vacuum or void on the streets for the individual struggling with substance use disorder to get what they were now addicted to. And heroin is the next logical step in that. So,
what do you see as something that could have prevented Keith from this ever happening? Now, granted, you had some medical issues that were obvious. What do you do? I mean, a little boy has club feet. You give him medicine to help him feel better. aside from that, what do you think could have stopped the amplification?
A few things. Number one, education of my parents, because again, they saw me reeling in pain and they'd give me what the doctors gave me and I would feel better. So I think maybe educating the parents on the dangers of opioid medication and just how addictive they really are.
Like we go baby book on how to raise a kid, you might need to throw hey, stay away from drugs 101 in there too.
Yeah, and then the other glaring thing is the doctors themselves. The pharmaceutical companies did not do a very good job of educating the doctors on the dangers. I truly believe that they knew the dangers of OxyContin. They knew the danger of Percocet, which is also oxycodone. It became such a profit-driven venture that the doctors weren't being told the whole truth and were likely getting kickbacks from prescribing so much. So I think really in med schools and stuff, I know that doctors, it's like one class they have to take in their 12 years of school on the addiction process. In today's world, with the amount of individuals we have struggling with substance use disorder, I think that we could do a better job of educating the people that educate us, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And then how about education in schools, you think, for the kids?
It happens already.
Yeah.
I don't think we do it young enough. That is starting to change. So some of the prevention initiatives out there, they have moved from like the high schools to the middle schools. I'm not even sure if that's early enough. I'm a big believer in early and often for a lot of things, boundaries with people, prevention, education, all that stuff. The sooner we start having these conversations with kids and educating them on the dangers, the real dangers of these, not just say, you don't want to be that homeless guy in the park, but really look and see, hey, the doctor could be struggling with this very same thing. The judge, the lawyer, the police officer, as seen here locally recently. You know, we've had some pretty prominent folks in the community suffer with substance use disorder that have been made public. So really reducing that stigma that is attached to the demonization of people that struggle with substance abuse disorder and just having conversations with our kids. Like, this does happen. Just having that conversation and that basic education up front initially will pay off dividends down the road. There is a whole recovery community, not just here in Johnstown, but across the Laurel Mountain Highlands, of people that have struggled and, you know, rebuilt their lives and help people on a day-to-day basis, not only to help others, but to kind of keep them focused on their own personal recovery. We are out there. We do get and stay well for long periods of time. I think so often we only hear the bad. We hear the stuff on the news and the people robbing the stores and the people in and out of jail and constantly on probation violations and just caught in that system. I don't think we do a good enough job of highlighting the success stories. We don't hear those enough.
Part of my personal, I had a cousin die. I've had other people close to me that have substance abuse. Part of someone like me that I've partied, but the only thing I was never able to stop was food. Food's the only thing that I've been truly addicted to.
I've been in that boat too.
Yeah. And I've also had surgeries. I've had a hip replacement. I've had back surgery, and I've been on pain meds. Mm-hmm. I can sympathize somewhat with someone that has been down that. I did not get addicted to them. I didn't keep going. But it seems to me that part of the community, what has to change is people who are in recovery too. Some that I have talked to, and I don't know if it's that they aren't as far advanced in their therapy. There's always going to be a stigma attached. And it's not that the general public wants to look badly upon people, but some people are just stronger than others. Some people can put things down, some people can't. But I also think that on the backside of, yes, we need to help understand people with addiction, but they also have to realize this takes time for people to be able to come, and you being in that too. I mean, I can't just all of a sudden you've been clean for 30 days and I'm saying, oh, okay, I can totally trust you.
Sure.
It doesn't work that way.
No, and we could do a better job of educating families of people struggling with substance use disorder. As a father myself, raising 2 little girls, I hope that I am never put in the position my mother is. My brother died of a heroin overdose about 18 months ago. I think we don't do a good job of educating what help really looks like for individuals struggling with substance use disorder. I think we are so quick to clean up messes and do a lot of enabling that feels like the loving thing because, okay, they're hungry, They may not have a place to sleep. They may have legal issues and they can't afford a lawyer. So often I see families rushing to clean up messes, and my family did that for me for years, and it never allowed me the opportunity to recover. I fully didn't think it was my problem until I had no other resources to point to and say, things aren't that bad. And again, I don't want to say that there's a hard and fast answer, because literally when we're dealing with this substance use disorder issues, often there is no right or wrong answer. It is a process like anything else, both for the individual struggling with substance use disorder and the families too. It's very hard to look at something and say, this is exactly what you need to do, and if you do it, it will work, and if you don't, it won't.
It's not like a math problem.
No, it isn't. That's the hard part. We also need to look at the systems that these individuals get caught up in. The criminal justice system, it's very easy to say, lock them up and they'll learn. But I think the last 20, 30 years with the war on drugs clearly demonstrates that that's not a great approach for most people. Better access to treatment is definitely needed, but that always comes down to funding. Yes, it's proven that the longer people stay in treatment, if we can keep people in treatment for a year, they are hundreds of % more likely to get and stay clean than a 20-day stay. But it always comes down to who's going to pay for it. Again, there's really no one answer to this. It's going to take a multifaceted approach and a lot of new and innovative thinking that takes time to develop. We're not going to go from lock them up and throw away the key to a community-based recovery center where people get 18 to 36 months of treatment and is connected to vocational resources, educational resources, and have them be accepted members of the community. That's going to happen in very small incremental steps. And really, it starts with those of us in recovery getting out there, putting out a consistent message where people start hearing the language that is not stigmatizing and hearing that, we do live in your communities. We are your neighbors. We are recovering, and we are doing what we need to do to keep ourselves well. And it is possible for others.
What was it that got you to stop?
Prison, my father dying, and my family cutting me off completely. The combination of those three things, kind of all in the same time frame, no one was answering the phone when I was calling anymore. No one was giving me money when I was calling with a sob story to why my electric's going to get shut off, or I have a hole in my shoe and I need new ones. No one was putting me a plate of food on the porch just to make sure that I could eat. No one was giving me a car to drive. No one was cleaning up my messes anymore. Now, that happened about 18 months prior to me stopping. So it got way worse for 18 months. And I can't even imagine what it was like for my mother and my family to watch that process happen. But I had caused so much pain and so much damage for 15 years in their life, well, probably about 10 years in their life, that they literally could not do it anymore. They chose to get better whether I did or not. And again, I can't imagine what that's like for a parent or a sister or a loved one or a husband or a brother to have to make that decision. I see the pain that caused now, almost 7 years past and into my own recovery. And I have a lot of family members reach out to me because they know what I do for a living and a little bit of my story. And that's what I always tell them. You need to define what love really looks like for you towards them, and how much do you want to get better, whether they do or not.